Hi there, this is Solitarian from Solitarian Films, and welcome to another double take. And today's double take are two films by Byron Haskins, both starring Lisabeth Scott. 1949's Too Late for Tears, and 1947's I Walk Alone. These are two film noirs, and they're both quite fantastic. The first one, 1947, I Walk Alone, starring Burt Lancaster, Lisabeth Scott, Wendell Corey, who you might recognise from The Big Knife, Robert Aldridge's film with Jack Palance and Rod Steiger, and Kirk Douglas. Now this is, Burt Lancaster's big break was 1946 with The Killers. So this is 1947, and this is a role where he really shows off his physicality, and he plays Frankie, who's been in prison for 14 years, who was partners with Kirk Douglas, running booze during the Prohibition. And Kirk Douglas has now turned himself into a nightclub owner, and Burt Lancaster wants his share. It's a great performance by Lancaster, but it's a very strange performance by him, because even though he's supposed to be the hero, he is just furious all the time. There's so many shots of him, and his arms are almost like 45 degrees, and he's clenching his fists. His cheekbones are constantly clenched, and he's generally grumpy and furious most of the time. And he's the hero. Kirk Douglas plays the suave, slimy, superior nightclub owner, which is kind of reminiscent of his performance in Build My Gallows High, Jacques Tournier's fantastic noir with Robert Mitchum. And it's really quite well done, because Lancaster is still thinking in terms of the old days. He wants 50-50 split, but of course Kirk Douglas and his accountant, played by Wendell Corey, tries to explain to Lancaster that the club, it's all owned by 3 different corporations, so you can't just get money out of it. And Lancaster is just kind of baffled by this and more frustrated by this. Lisabeth Scott plays a more kind of standard female role. We'll talk about her performance in Too Late for Tears in a second. And she is in love with Kirk Douglas, even though Kirk Douglas is going to marry a socialite just to help his club out, which obviously confuses Lisabeth Scott. So she then falls for Burt Lancaster's character. So it's a bit more kind of conventional in her performance or her role, but Lisabeth Scott still brings an edge to it, and brings a strength to it, rather than sometimes the kind of wet and weepy gangsters mall part in some of these films. She's still intelligent, and she still has an edge to her and a toughness to her, and she's caught between the two of them. It's beautifully shot. This Kina Lorber print is really quite nice, and it has a commentary by Troy Howarth, which I'm going to have to check out. And again, Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster made 7 films together. Probably my favourite 7 Days in May. But this was their first film together. And it's just interesting to see, obviously, what they would become in the future. These 2 megastars. Yeah, I mean, it's unusual for Lancaster, because he does play such a generally not that likeable guy, and like I said, he's like a tense spring for the whole film, whereas Kirk Douglas is more kind of composed and more experienced, if you will. And it's obviously things go south. I'm not going to spoil things for anybody, and they have the inevitable showdown, and it's just very well done. And the other film I want to talk about is Too Late for Tears, which for me is the far superior film. I had never heard of this. Granted, I haven't heard of quite a lot of films, but I'd never heard of this. This is actually part of a 5-year crusade by the UCLA Film Noir Foundation to pretty much restore this and find it again, because it had pretty much been lost, which would have been a shame, because granted I haven't done my top 20 film noirs, might be end up top 25 film noirs, but after seeing this will have skyrocketed into the top 20. It's absolutely fantastic. It's the simple story of a couple, Lisabeth Scott and Arthur Kennedy. Arthur Kennedy, who was pretty much throughout his career, he was always the other guy. Well, in this film, he's technically the lead actor, and they're going for a little drive in the country, and a suitcase full of money happens to fall into their car, or be thrown into their car. And Arthur Kennedy wants to give it to the police, and Lisabeth Scott says, let's just wait. If you take Humphrey Bogart's performance in Treasure of Sierra Madre and put it up a couple of notches, that's where Lisabeth Scott's performance in this is. Her lust, which is probably the only word for it, her lust for the money is it's just wonderful to watch. She doesn't overact. She doesn't chew scenery. It's such a great performance, because she dominates the film. She dominates the men in the film, and it's her lust for the money that just drives the plot forward. Dan Durea, again, who made a career out of being the other guy, he plays the small-time hood who claims that the money was meant for him. It was part of a blackmail plot. And then there's also a guy that turns up, claiming to be friends with the husband and trying to get, again, I'm not going to get into the details of the plot, but this being a noir, things happen, things go not necessarily according to plan, but it's just such a great wee film. I can't recommend it highly enough. Again, if Arrow's doing a sale, I would highly recommend getting this. The extras are really good. It's got a commentary, it's got a behind the scenes examination of the original production and how they got, to restore it. But it's such a great performance by Lisabeth Scott in 1949, when usually women in noirs, yes, there were femme fatales, but she's not necessarily a femme fatale. She's essentially just an ordinary housewife, but just those dollar signs popping up in her eyes, she just goes, and it's brilliant because even Dan Deria, who's like a small time crook and used to like, you know, doing shady things, even at one point it's just like she's too much for him and he wants like out because she's just like so crazed that she'll do anything to keep the money. Yeah, highly recommend both films. They're both interesting in their own right. Like I said, for me, Too Late for Tears is the better film, but I Walk Alone is a nice little film, and again, the early Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas sparring is just an absolute treat to watch. But Lisabeth Scott in Too Late for Tears is just absolutely fantastic, and one of the best. Again, she's not a typical femme fatale in it, but certainly one of the best female performances in a noir you'll ever see. Just a good, strong, smart, fantastic performance. So thank you very much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen these films and what you thought of them, if I'm talking complete nonsense, which is highly likely. And hopefully we'll see you again. This is Solitude Ronin saying thank you very much for watching.